Now that first layer of grey is dry, what we need to do is add the second layer. And the first layer is a kind of base coat for the paint, but the second layer is now really the kind of true colour that we're looking for. And this is the Fortress Grey. But again, what we want to do is just be careful when we apply it to both the stones and the main disc to leave some of the original Codex Grey just showing underneath, and that way we'll get some nice depth of colour. So it's a kind of wet brush that we're looking for, so we are applying it quite heavily. We're covering up, I don't know, 80% of the paint, and just take the time, make sure it's going to work properly for us. Let me just add a bit more there. Remember, this is the main colour, so we are covering up the original Codex Grey. Codex Grey? Yeah, Codex Grey cover that we just put on. This is the light colour of the stone we're looking for. We're going to do a bit of highlight afterwards as the third colour. Here we go. If you get a little bit of a sort of blotchy effect going on as well, that's good, because stone isn't all perfectly coloured, all very evenly coloured. So that's looking pretty good, and that just lifts the colour now away from that sort of very battleship type grey. Do the front and back, and the stones in the same colour. Again, the suggestion here is that the stones on the ground maybe were the stone that was used to make the main disc. So we'll just go and finish that off. And when that's dry, then we can go and put the final highlight on. Okay. Now that that paint's dry, the next step to do is just to add the extreme highlight for the grey onto the edges. The way to do this is to take we're using Astronomical Grey here, and just feather the edges and the highlights, because we don't want to overpaint, but we do want to make sure that, again, we're lifting out the extreme areas, that we're adding different sort of depth of colour and texture to the piece. So there we go. So we just, again, a light dry brush on the other pieces too, on the stones, and this will really bring it to life now. This final highlight just sets off edges like this and details, as we can see on the back. Again, don't overdo it. This is probably 30% of the whole piece is going to look like this, because this is just the extremely exposed areas. That's enough for that. Now that this grey is dry, the next thing to do is add a wash of Devlin mud, and what this will do is just bring out the detail and make it look like the stonework's been out in the weather for ages and ages, and add it to the stonework as well. And that's the final piece for the stone. With the brown dry, what we need to do now is add the green, and I'm going to add the green only in the places that we don't have sand. Again, this is the Catagen green. I've watered it down. It will dry darker than it looks, and if you just overlap the green ever so slightly on the pieces, again, that will help to bring the colours together. This green area is mainly where I'm going to put the grass. I'm going to highlight the rest of the stone area, where we put the sand, to make it look like this is we're not down on the lush pastures of Mornia here. We're up in the mountains somewhere. That extra noise is my son, who's showing me how he can play with a paintbrush. So there we go, just a quick layer of green on the smooth areas of the piece, with a little overlap onto the stones and so on. Okay. Once the green's dry, what we need to do then is a dry brush of snakebite leather over this brown area where we've put the sand, and when that's dry, then a dry brush of bleached bone, because then what we'll do, we'll end up with effectively four shades that will lift out the colour of this sand area and give us some good contrast to where we're suggesting there's more sort of grassy, soily area on the model. Now that we've finished painting and highlighting the piece, the next step is to put the foliage on, the static grass and the other items. So what we want to do is select areas of the model that we want to put some white PVA glue on, and then apply the static grass. Now I've got two colours, a kind of light grass here and a darker grass, but I need to leave some space as well because I've got some other bits of foliage that I want to maybe try putting on later. So the way to do this is to put a little dab of glue, and we can think about blending it around the rocks, maybe up to the model and so on, to get that effect there, the effect of blending the terrain pieces. So just tap that off, and there we go, we start to get that effect. Yeah. Now that the static grass is dried, the next thing we want to do is put the rest of the scenic items on there. And what I'm going to do is use a couple of woodland scenics pieces. Now placing these, really it's a case of find some items, find some of the little pieces that you think will fit well, try them on the model first, and then go on and glue them. So in this case, I'm going to add this piece just about here, and if you get a pair of tweezers and just dip the small item in some glue, you just do that off camera, and then just press it in place. Now you'll see the white glue at this point, but that's okay because it dries clear anyway. Just don't put too much on. That is, don't have too much showing, because you get that you will get a ridge of glue that will make it look a bit unnatural. So just apply them like so, and if it's a little bit on this stone area, again that could look good, let it look like the plant's been growing up there. And let's see if we can just put a little piece of this other colour on there too, like what, like here for example. There's maybe a little bit too much glue on that, but let's see how it dries. If I can get it to stay on. Alright, so that's the basics of the vegetation. Now I do have somewhere this lichen as well, but it's notoriously difficult to use because as soon as you start to tear it up, it opens up. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and put it behind on the model. Let me just do that like that, and yep, I'll just attach that to the back like that, and hopefully that will look okay when it's dry. There's one more type of foliage that I have, which is a kind of grass, and it's called field grass. I'll show that separately, but that's how we essentially put the foliage on there. So we're pretty much there now. We just need to finish off those last little bits. Right, just to show you what the field grass looks like, it basically looks like this. I think it's natural hair, but what you need to do is slice it straight on the bottom and then dip it in some glue, so you end up with some glue on the bottom here, and then place it on the model. It generally works better if you place it against something that's already there. Now a few hairs will fall around, the shape won't be quite right. This is a little long as well, but what we'll do is we'll cut this later. As it starts to dry, we can open up the fibres a little bit and then cut it to a more appropriate length. But that's essentially our piece now. I think that will do. We'll take a picture of that and we'll have a look at what that looks like. We'll let the grass dry first and we'll finish off the other one.